Welcome to Eden Notes, where we study the Bible verse by verse. We've discussed Genesis 1 to 50 on our previous videos, so if you're interested in that, make sure to watch those videos, like, and subscribe. Today we're going to learn about Exodus 1 to 10. The story begins in Egypt, where the family of Jacob has grown into an entire nation. What started as 70 people has now become thousands. The Israelites are multiplying quickly, filling the land with children, families, and strong young people. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, notices their growth and becomes afraid. He tells his advisors that the Israelites are becoming too powerful. He worries that if war breaks out, they might join Egypt's enemies and escape the country. Fear takes over his heart, and he decides the only way to control the Israelites is to break them. So Pharaoh forces them into slavery. Egyptian taskmasters are placed over the Israelites, and they are worked without rest. They are made to build storage cities, dig fields under the burning sun, carry heavy loads, and live with whips at their backs. But the harder they are oppressed, the more they grow. Their families keep expanding. Their community keeps strengthening. This only increases Pharaoh's fear. Pharaoh then forms a darker plan. He commands the Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, to kill every baby boy born to the Israelites, but let the girls live. The order is secret. The deaths are meant to look natural. But the midwives fear God more than they fear Pharaoh. They refuse to kill the babies and allow the boys to live. When Pharaoh confronts them, they tell him the Hebrew women give birth too quickly for them to act. God honors the midwives for their courage and gives them families of their own. Still determined, Pharaoh makes his cruelty public. He orders all Egyptians to throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River. The killing is no longer hidden. The waters of Egypt, once a symbol of life, become a place of death. During this terrifying time, a Levite woman gives birth to a baby boy. She hides him for 3 months, keeping him silent, desperate to protect him from Pharaoh's decree. But when she can no longer hide him safely, she makes a small basket of papyrus reeds, coats it with tar to keep it from sinking, places her baby inside, and sets it gently among the reeds along the riverbank. His sister watches from a distance to see what will happen. Pharaoh's daughter comes to the river to bathe and notices the basket. When she opens it, the baby begins to cry. Her heart softens, and she realizes he is one of the Hebrew children. Instead of killing him, she chooses compassion. At that moment, the baby's sister steps forward and offers to find a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for her. Pharaoh's daughter agrees. The child's own mother is brought to care for him, nursing and raising him under the protection of the royal household. When the boy is grown, he is returned to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopts him as her son and names him Moses, meaning drawn out, because she drew him out of the water. Moses grows up in the Egyptian palace, surrounded by wealth and power, but he knows he is Hebrew. One day, he goes out to see where his people live and work. He watches an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Moses looks around, sees no one watching, and strikes the Egyptian dead. He hides the body in the sand. The next day, Moses sees 2 Hebrew men fighting. He tries to break them apart and asks why they are hurting each other. One of them sneers at him and says, "Who made you a ruler and judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Fear grips Moses. He realizes his act is known. Pharaoh hears about the killing and orders Moses to be executed. Moses flees Egypt and runs far into the desert to the land of Midian. There he sits by a well. The daughters of a priest named Reuel come to draw water for their father's flock, but shepherds chase them away. Moses steps in to defend the women and helps them water the sheep. Reuel welcomes Moses into his household. Moses stays with him and marries one of his daughters, Zipporah. They have a son whom Moses names Gershom, saying, "I am a foreigner in a foreign land." Moses becomes a shepherd, spending years in the wilderness tending sheep under open skies. The palace life fades into memory as Moses learns patience, humility, and quiet dependence. Time passes, and the king of Egypt dies. Yet nothing improves for the Israelites. Their slavery continues, their suffering deepens, and their cries rise toward heaven. God hears their groaning. He remembers the covenant he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He sees their pain. He knows their suffering. One day, while Moses is herding sheep near a mountain called Horeb, he notices something unusual. A bush is burning, but it is not being consumed by the fire. Curious, Moses steps closer to inspect it. Suddenly, God speaks from the flames. Moses, Moses. Moses answers, "Here I am." God tells him not to come closer and to remove his sandals because he is standing on holy ground. God introduces himself as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses covers his face, afraid to look at God. God tells Moses that he has seen the suffering of his people in Egypt. He has heard their cries and has come to deliver them. God announces that Moses is the one chosen to lead the Israelites out of slavery and into a land flowing with milk and honey. But Moses responds with fear. "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" God answers simply, "I will be with you." Moses asks what name he should give if the people ask who sent him. God replies, "I am who I am." He tells Moses to say, "The God of your ancestors has sent me." God explains that Pharaoh will resist, but that powerful signs will convince him. God promises to strike Egypt with miracles and wonders until Pharaoh lets Israel go. He promises that the Israelites will leave not empty-handed, but with wealth given freely by the Egyptians. Still, Moses hesitates. He says, "What if they don't believe me?" God gives Moses signs to show them. He tells Moses to throw his staff to the ground, and it turns into a snake. When Moses picks it up again, it becomes a staff once more. God instructs Moses to place his hand inside his cloak. When he removes it, his hand is leprous and white as snow. When he puts it back inside his cloak, the skin is restored. God says that if the people still don't believe, Moses will pour water from the Nile onto the ground, and it will turn to blood. Moses remains doubtful. He tells God he is slow of speech and struggles to speak clearly. God responds with firm patience. He reminds Moses that he created the human mouth. He assures Moses that he will help him speak and teach him what to say. Yet Moses still begs God to choose someone else. God becomes angered but does not abandon him. He appoints Moses' brother Aaron to speak on Moses' behalf. God says Moses will carry the message from heaven to Aaron, and Aaron will speak to Pharaoh. Moses returns to Midian, asks his father-in-law for permission to return to Egypt, and sets out on the journey with his wife and children. God reminds him during the journey that Pharaoh will resist and that Moses must not fear. Along the way, a mysterious encounter nearly costs Moses his life. Zipporah steps in quickly and circumcises their son, fulfilling the covenant sign and saving Moses. The family continues onward after the terrifying moment passes. Meanwhile, God sends Aaron to meet Moses in the desert. When the brothers reunite, they embrace with joy. Together, they return to Egypt. They gather the elders of Israel. Aaron speaks all that God said. Moses performs the signs God showed him. The elders believe, and when they hear that God has seen their suffering, they bow and worship. Moses and Aaron go before Pharaoh. They declare, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says, let my people go, so they may hold a festival to me in the wilderness." Pharaoh scoffs, "Who is the Lord that I should obey him? I do not know this God, and I will not let Israel go." Instead, Pharaoh accuses the Israelites of laziness for wanting to worship. He increases their suffering as punishment. He commands that the slaves must gather their own straw while still producing the same number of bricks each day. The workload becomes unbearable. The Israelite foremen are beaten when they fail to meet the impossible quotas. The foremen plead with Pharaoh for mercy, but he refuses. They leave Pharaoh's palace devastated and encounter Moses and Aaron. Their frustration explodes. They accuse Moses of making life worse, not better. They say he has placed a sword in Pharaoh's hand to kill them. Moses cries out to God, "Why have you brought trouble on these people? Why did you send me? Ever since I came to Pharaoh in your name, he has harmed them, and you have not rescued your people at all." God answers Moses. He reminds Moses of who he is, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He tells Moses that even when Pharaoh refuses to listen, it is not the end of the story. God explains that he is about to show his power so clearly that Egypt will know who he is. God tells Moses that he will personally bring Israel out of slavery with mighty acts of judgment. God says he is the Lord who heard their groaning in Egypt and remembered his covenant. He promises to free them, rescue them from oppression, redeem them with power, and bring them into their own land. He tells Moses to speak these words to the Israelites. But when Moses speaks, the people do not listen. They are too crushed by sorrow, too exhausted by slavery. Hope feels dangerous now. Still, God commands Moses to go to Pharaoh again. Moses hesitates. He reminds God of his rough speech and doubt. God reassures Moses and says that Aaron will speak for him. God declares that Pharaoh's heart will be hardened, not because Moses will fail, but because God plans to multiply his signs and wonders. The resistance itself will make God's power impossible to ignore. God reveals the lineage of Moses and Aaron, linking them directly to Israel's priesthood and leadership. Then he sends them forward. Moses and Aaron approach Pharaoh. God instructs them to prove their calling through a sign. Aaron throws down his staff, and it becomes a serpent. Pharaoh summons his magicians, and they perform the same sign with secret arts. But Aaron's serpent swallows theirs. Pharaoh's heart grows stubborn. Pharaoh refuses to believe. God tells Moses to go early the next morning and confront Pharaoh by the river. Moses announces the first judgment. He warns Pharaoh that the waters of Egypt will turn to blood if he refuses to release God's people. Pharaoh refuses again. Moses stretches his staff over the Nile, and instantly the river turns into blood. The streams, canals, ponds, all water becomes blood. Fish die. The river stinks. Egyptians dig holes near the riverbank for clean water to drink. The magicians repeat the sign through their arts. Pharaoh remains unmoved. 7 days pass. God sends another judgment. Moses warns Pharaoh that frogs will cover Egypt if he does not obey. Pharaoh still refuses. Aaron stretches his hand over the waters, and frogs erupt everywhere. Rivers, homes, bedrooms, kitchens, ovens, even into the palace itself. The land is overwhelmed. Pharaoh finally calls for Moses and Aaron. He begs them to pray for relief and promises to let Israel go. Moses agrees and asks Pharaoh to choose the time when the frogs should disappear. Pharaoh says, "Tomorrow." Moses prays, and the frogs die the next day. They are piled into heaps across Egypt, filling the land with the stench of decay. But once Pharaoh sees the relief, he changes his mind. He refuses to release the Israelites. God responds with a third judgment. Aaron strikes the dust of the ground, and it becomes gnats swarming over people and animals. The magicians attempt to copy the sign, but fail. This time, even they admit to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. Yet Pharaoh still hardens his heart. God sends the fourth judgment. Swarms of flies blanket Egypt. They invade homes and cover the land. Yet in the region where the Israelites live, there are no flies at all. God makes a clear separation between Egypt and his people. Pharaoh summons Moses. He offers a compromise. He tells Israel they can worship, but they must do so within Egypt. Moses refuses. He explains that their sacrifices would offend Egyptians, and they must worship God in the wilderness as commanded. Pharaoh slightly yields. He promises to allow the people to go if Moses prays for the flies to be removed. Moses warns Pharaoh not to lie again. Moses prays, and the flies vanish. Pharaoh breaks his promise. God sends another judgment. Moses warns Pharaoh that a powerful plague will strike Egyptian livestock if he refuses to let Israel go. Horses, donkeys, camels, cattle, sheep, all will be affected. Yet not one animal belonging to Israel will die. Pharaoh refuses. The next day, the plague strikes. Egyptian livestock die across the land. None of Israel's animals perish. Pharaoh investigates and confirms the difference, but his heart remains unmoved. God sends the sixth judgment. Moses and Aaron toss ashes into the air before Pharaoh. Fine dust spreads through Egypt and settles on people and animals, forming painful boils. Even the magicians are struck and cannot stand before Moses. But Pharaoh hardens his heart again. God sends a message ahead of the seventh judgment. He tells Moses to speak words of warning to Pharaoh. God explains that Pharaoh has been preserved for a purpose, to show the world God's power. God announces a devastating hailstorm is coming, worse than any Egypt has ever known. This time, God allows mercy. He instructs the Egyptians to bring their servants and livestock indoors for protection. Some Egyptians listen and take cover. Others ignore the warning. Moses raises his staff toward the heavens, and thunder roars. Fire flashes through the sky. Hail crashes down, shattering trees and destroying crops. People and animals who stayed in the fields die instantly. Nothing in the land of Egypt survives the storm except in Goshen, where Israel lives. There, no hail falls. Terrified, Pharaoh calls Moses. I have sinned, he says. The Lord is righteous. Please stop the storm, and I will let the people go. Moses prays. The thunder ceases. The hail stops. The rain dries. Once Pharaoh sees the calm return, his heart hardens again. He refuses to let the people go. God sends the eighth judgment. Moses warns Pharaoh of locusts so thick they will darken the sun and devour everything that remains after the hail. Pharaoh's officials beg him to surrender. Do you not realize Egypt is ruined? They plead. Pharaoh summons Moses and Aaron again. He agrees to allow worship, but says only the men can go. Women and children must stay behind. Moses refuses. He insists everyone must go. Pharaoh explodes in anger and orders Moses to leave his presence, warning him never to return. Moses replies calmly that Pharaoh has spoken correctly. He will not return again. Then the locusts come. A powerful east wind blows all night, bringing swarms deeper and heavier than anything Egypt has ever seen. They blanket the land completely, devouring crops, leaves, bark, everything still green. Egypt is left barren. Pharaoh quickly summons Moses. I have sinned against your God and against you, he says. Forgive me. Pray for this plague to end. Moses prays. God drives the locusts away with a west wind and throws them into the Red Sea. But Pharaoh once more hardens his heart. God sends the ninth judgment. Suddenly, total darkness spreads across Egypt. A darkness so thick it can be felt. For 3 days no one can see anyone else. No one moves from where they sit. No lamps work. No sunlight breaks through. Yet among the Israelites, there is light. Pharaoh calls Moses again. He offers another compromise. The people may go. Their children may go too. But their livestock must stay behind. Moses refuses. They will not leave without taking the animals needed for worship. They do not yet know what God will require, and they must bring everything. Pharaoh erupts in rage. He threatens to kill Moses if he ever appears before him again. Moses looks at him and answers with final certainty. You have spoken correctly. I will not see your face again. The confrontation ends there. Darkness still grips Egypt, but an even greater judgment is now on its way. Thank you for staying with us on Exodus 1 through 10. We will be back with the next chapters on our next video. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it. God bless you.